My sister-in-law tortured me for 2 years with hidden insults, but when she abandoned me at her bachelorette party, I exploded in front of her entire family and destroyed her reputation forever. I'm 32 years old. I'm married to Matthew and have been for 5 years now. And I need to tell this story because what happened a few months ago basically freed me from 2 years of a silent nightmare that I never thought would end. The thing is, my sister-in-law, Vanessa, is literally one of those people who makes you feel small without saying anything explicitly bad, you know? Like everything she says sounds innocent if you repeat it, but in the moment it leaves you with this horrible feeling in your stomach that you just got insulted and nobody else noticed. And the worst part of it all is that for a long time I thought it was my problem, that I was being too sensitive or paranoid, until everything exploded in the most dramatic way possible, and I could finally see that no, I definitely wasn't crazy. I should start at the beginning, when I met Vanessa like 7 years ago at a family dinner. Matthew and I had been dating for a year, I think, and it was the first time I was going to meet his whole family at once. I was nervous, obviously, because I wanted to make a good impression and all that. Vanessa was like 22 at the time, fresh out of college, and I honestly expected that we'd get along because I don't have sisters and I thought it would be nice to have that connection. You know, like sisters-in-law who become friends. How naive I was. Seriously. The dinner started well. Everyone was super nice to me, especially Matthew's mom, Diane, who at the time seemed like the sweetest woman in the world. Spoiler alert. She wasn't as sweet as I thought. But then Vanessa arrived late, like half an hour late, and when she walked into the house she looked directly at me and said, "Oh, hi. I don't think we've met before." And I was like, "What?" Because Matthew had literally shown her pictures of me and told her about me before that dinner, she knew perfectly well who I was. But okay, I thought. Maybe she got confused or was nervous. I let it go. What I couldn't ignore was what happened next. We sat down for dinner, and Vanessa kept staring at me, like studying me. And at one point she says in front of everyone, "Wow, Amanda, your makeup looks so natural. It almost looks like you're not wearing any." And everyone laughed like it was a compliment. But I knew. It wasn't. Because I was wearing makeup that day, I had actually put in quite a bit of effort, and the way she said it, with that little smirk, was clearly her way of saying I looked bad, or my makeup was horrible. Matthew didn't notice anything. Nobody noticed. And I just sat there feeling like an idiot, and wondering if what just happened really happened. That was the first of literally hundreds of interactions like that over the next 2 years. After that dinner, every time I saw Vanessa, it was the same shit disguised as kindness. She'd say things like, "Oh, Amanda, I love that you don't care so much about your appearance. It's so refreshing to see someone so comfortable with themselves." Or, "How nice that Matthew found someone who's not superficial like the girls he used to date." And she'd say it in front of the family, in front of her mom, and everyone would nod like she was being super nice to me. But every comment was a stab specifically designed to make me feel ugly, careless, or not good enough. And the worst part, is that when I tried to explain to Matthew how those comments made me feel, he didn't understand. He'd tell me, "Babe, Vanessa's not like that. She probably means, well, don't take it so personally." And I started to feel like I was going crazy. Like, am I the one misinterpreting everything? Am I the dramatic one? 6 months of this went by, of constant passive-aggressive comments about my hair, my clothes, my weight, my face, basically anything related to my physical appearance. Vanessa had this special ability to make me feel like trash and then act like she was being my best friend. One day, we were at a family gathering. I think it was Diane's birthday, and Vanessa asked me in front of everyone if I'd considered dyeing my hair because, according to her, my natural color washed out my face. She said, "No offense, Amanda. I just want to help you look better. You're so pretty, but you don't try hard enough, you know?" And everyone there like it was nothing. Like that was a normal and acceptable comment. I went to the bathroom and cried, literally cried from frustration, because I didn't know how to defend myself without seeming sensitive or confrontational. That night on the way home, I told Matthew I didn't want to see his sister again if she was going to keep treating me like that. And finally, he sat down with me and explained something that completely changed my perspective. Turns out Vanessa had always been like this, since she was little. Matthew told me that his sister had been the classic mean girl in middle school and high school, that she had a little group of friends, Kristen and Lauren, and they basically terrorized other girls in super subtle ways that adults never noticed. He told me Vanessa had done the same thing with his cousin's girlfriends, with his uncle's wives, with any woman who entered the family that she perceived as a threat or competition, and that Diane, his mom, had always defended and justified her, saying Vanessa was just honest and direct, that the other women were too sensitive. Matthew admitted he'd never confronted her, because, well, she's his little sister. And I guess there's that dynamic of the older brother who overprotects her no matter what. But he promised me he was going to talk to her, and things were going to change. Spoiler: nothing changed. After that conversation, I decided to completely change my strategy. If Vanessa was going to be a passive-aggressive bitch to me, I was simply going to act like she didn't exist, and it worked surprisingly well, honestly. I stopped responding to her comments. I stopped trying to be her friend. I basically treated her with a cold and superficial courtesy like, hello, goodbye, thanks for inviting us, see you later, nothing more. And I could see it frustrated her not being able to provoke a reaction from me, which gave me a petty but real satisfaction. Like a year went by like that, with Vanessa making her venomous comments and me ignoring her completely, and I thought things were going to stay that way forever, in this uncomfortable but manageable stalemate. And then came the invitation to the bachelorette trip. Vanessa was getting married, obviously to some poor guy who had no idea what he was getting into, and she called me out of the blue one day to invite me to her bachelorette trip. She said, Amanda, I know things between us have been weird lately and I want to fix it. You're my brother's wife, and that means your family. And I'd love for you to come to my bachelorette party so we can reconnect and start fresh. And I, like the idiot I am, believed her. I mean, part of me knew it was suspicious, but another part genuinely wanted to believe she was being sincere, that maybe she'd matured or realized how she'd been with me. I said yes, and she gave me all the details. It was going to be a weekend at a spa resort like 6 hours away. It was going to be just her, me, Kristen, and Lauren, her longtime friends. And basically we were going to relax and have a good time. It sounded nice. Like an opportunity to finally have that sister-in-law relationship I'd always wanted. Matthew was excited that we were finally going to get along, and I was too. What an idiot. The day of the trip came and Vanessa picked me up early, like 7 inches the morning on a Friday. She'd already picked up Kristen and Lauren, so when I got in the car, the 3 of them were already in the front and middle seats, and the only available spot was all the way in the back. Weird. But, okay. I didn't say anything. What I did find super strange is that the entire trip, and when I say entire trip, I mean the complete 6 hours, the 3 of them talked to each other like I wasn't there. Like, they literally excluded me from every conversation, told inside jokes, remembered high school anecdotes, and if I tried to throw in any comment or question, they'd respond with monosyllables and continue with their thing. 6 hours of feeling invisible in a car while we drove who knows where in the middle of nowhere. I started to feel like maybe this hadn't been a good idea, but we were already far from home and I thought, well, maybe when we get to the spa things will get better. Maybe they're all excited and that's why they're in their bubble. Yeah, right. We arrived at the resort around 1 in the afternoon and the place was beautiful. I'm not going to lie. It was one of those fancy spas with thermal pools and facial treatments and all that. Vanessa did the check-in while we waited in the lobby, and when she came back with the room keys, she said, Okay, girls, so Kristen and Lauren are going to share a room. I'm going to come sit, to be in another one because obviously I'm the bride and I need my space, and Amanda, you're going to be with me. Perfect, I thought. Maybe now we're really going to have that conversation she mentioned, where we fix things. We went up to the room, and when she opened the door, I saw there was only one king-size bed. Pretty big, and a couch. Vanessa threw her suitcase on the bed and told me, casual as anything. You can sleep on the floor. I need the whole bed because I move around a lot when I sleep, and the couch is too uncomfortable for me. And I just stood there. Like, what? Is she telling me to sleep on the floor? After she invited me to her bachelorette party and we drove 6 hours to get here? I told her, Vanessa, there's a perfectly good couch here. I can sleep there if you don't want to share the bed. And she, with that fake concerned face she knew so well how to put on, told me, Oh, Amanda, don't be dramatic. It's just a weekend. Plus, the floor has carpet. It's not like it's concrete. I felt my face burning with humiliation and rage, but before I could say anything else, Kristen and Lauren knocked on the door and came in, and Vanessa told them, laughing, and that I was going to sleep on the floor because I was the youngest at heart and didn't care about those things. And they laughed too, like it was the funniest thing in the world. I don't know at what exact moment I decided it, but something broke inside me in that instant. I looked at Vanessa, looked at her friends, laughing at me, looked at the bed that was going to be all hers while I supposedly slept on the floor like a dog, and I thought, no, hell no. This is over. I told them I was going to the bathroom, grabbed my bag, went down to the lobby as calmly as I could, and asked the receptionist to please help me because I needed to leave immediately due to a family emergency. She was super kind and let me use the hotel phone to call Matthew. I told him what happened. He got furious, obviously, and told me to get out of there right away. The problem was that Vanessa had driven and had the car keys. So I did something that probably wasn't the most mature but seemed completely justified to me. I went back up to the room when I knew the three of them were at the spa, grabbed the car keys from Vanessa's purse, left a note that said, "I'm going home, figure out how to get back," and drove the 6 hours back alone at night. It was the most liberating 6 hours of my life. I'm not going to lie. I cried the first hour from pure rage and humiliation, but then I felt, I don't know, powerful, I guess. I put on music, bought junk food at a gas station, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I had taken control of the situation, instead of being the passive victim of Vanessa's mind games. I got home around 11 at night and Matthew was waiting up for me, super worried. I told him everything. Absolutely everything. From the passive-aggressive comments of the last 2 years to the floor thing. And I could see that finally, he understood the magnitude of what his sister had been doing to me. He hugged me and told me, "This isn't going to stay like this, I promise." The next morning, like 8 o'clock, the phone started ringing. It was Vanessa. Matthew answered, and I could hear her screaming from where I was sitting. That how dare I leave them stranded, that I was selfish, that I had ruined her bachelorette party, that I owed her an apology. Matthew let her scream for like 2 minutes and then told her, with a calm that surprised me, "Vanessa, you're a spoiled brat who has treated my wife like trash since the day she met her, and I'm not going to your wedding." And he hung up. Just like that. I was like, wow, okay, this is getting serious. And I was right, because the next 2 weeks were absolute chaos. Vanessa, Kristen, and Lauren started calling me directly, all indignant, telling me I had to convince Matthew to go to the wedding, that he was being ridiculous, that I had exaggerated everything. I ignored all the calls. Then Diane got involved. She called me crying, saying how could we do this to Vanessa at such an important moment in her life, that we were family and family supports each other no matter what. I explained what had happened. I told her about the 2 years of horrible comments and the humiliation of the trip, and she basically told me I was too sensitive and that Vanessa was just playing, that was her sense of humor, and I should have thicker skin. I hung up before saying something I'd regret, but Diane didn't give up. She kept calling, sending messages, and when she saw she wasn't getting anywhere with me, she started pressuring Matthew directly. She told him he was being controlled by me, that he was breaking up the family, that if he didn't go to the wedding, she was going to make the whole family cut them off. Matthew finally exploded one night and drove to his parents' house like at 10 at night to talk to his mom face to face. I didn't go, because honestly I didn't feel like seeing that woman, but Matthew told me later that it was horrible. Diane accused him of being a bad brother, of being under my influence, of prioritizing his wife over his blood family, as if those two things were mutually exclusive. And she told him, verbatim, "If you don't go to that wedding, I'm going to make sure every member of this family cuts contact with you and your wife." Matthew told her that if that was her decision, go ahead, but he wasn't going to force me to apologize for defending myself from her abusive daughter, and he left. I thought that was going to be the end, that they'd leave us alone. But no, because 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning when I was getting ready to go to work, there was a knock on the door. It was 6:30 in the morning. I opened it, and there were Diane and Vanessa, standing on my porch with martyr faces, saying they needed to talk to Matthew urgently. I told them Matthew was still sleeping and to come back later at a reasonable hour, but Diane pushed me, literally pushed me aside, and they entered my house without permission. They went up to our bedroom and started banging on the bedroom door, yelling for him to open. Matthew came out in sweatpants and a t-shirt, confused and angry, and Diane started with the same speech as always, that we were selfish, that we were being dramatic, that Vanessa had invited me on her trip as a peace gesture and I had ruined everything, that I owed her an apology, that Matthew owed it to his sister to be at her wedding because it was his obligation as an older brother. And I, who had been putting up with all this shit in silence for 2 weeks, who had tried to be the mature person and not cause more drama, simply exploded. I yelled at Diane that her daughter was a manipulative abuser who had spent 2 years making me feel horrible about myself, that she had humiliated me in front of her friends by telling me to sleep on the floor after driving 6 hours to celebrate her wedding, and that if she was too blind or too complicit to see what her precious girl really was, that was her problem, not mine. I told Vanessa she was a pathetic, insecure person who only felt good about herself when she made other women feel bad, and that it was obvious why she needed to bring her high school lackeys everywhere, because no adult woman with dignity would want to be her friend. And I told both of them to get out of my house immediately, or I was going to call the police. They left. Diane was crying. Vanessa was in shock because it was probably the first time in her life someone had told her how things really were, and I was shaking with adrenaline and a little bit of panic because, well, I had just burned every possible bridge with my husband's family. Matthew hugged me and told me I had done the right thing, that he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. But I still spent the rest of the day feeling that horrible guilt of, did I do too much? Should I have kept quiet? Now are we going to be the family villains forever? Matthew assured me no, that his family needed to hear that years ago, and that if some members decided to cut us off for this, then they weren't worth it anyway. The wedding happened without us. We didn't go, obviously. But what did happen is that Vanessa, in her bride speech, decided to mention me. I wasn't there, but several relatives told me later that she talked about how she had tried to include her sister-in-law in her life, but that I was a dramatic and difficult person who caused problems, and that despite that, she forgave me and hoped that someday I could overcome my insecurities and be part of the family. Basically, she painted herself as the victim and me as the crazy one. Classic. What's interesting is what happened after. Turns out several of Matthew's aunts, uncles, and cousins started contacting us, asking what really happened, because Vanessa's speech didn't match what they knew about us. Matthew told them the truth, without exaggerating or adding drama, just the facts. The comments about my appearance for 2 years, the fake invitation to the trip, the floor thing, everything. And suddenly we started receiving messages of support from people who said, you know what? Vanessa was also horrible to me at some point. Or, Diane has always justified her and never sets boundaries. It was super validating to realize it wasn't just me, that other people had also suffered from Vanessa's behavior and simply hadn't said anything to keep the family peace. The best part, and when I say best, I mean the most satisfying in a petty way that I'm not proud of but don't regret either, is that several extended family members cut contact with Vanessa and Diane after finding out what really happened. Matthew's cousins don't invite them to gatherings anymore. The uncles stopped talking to them. They basically got isolated from half the family. And us, Matthew and I, we're better than ever. We're still married, obviously, happier without the constant drama, and we haven't spoken to Vanessa or Diane since that day they came to our house. Sometimes I feel guilty about how things exploded. Like, maybe I could have handled the situation with more grace or maturity. But most of the time I feel relieved, free, like I took a huge weight off my shoulders. I no longer have to mentally prepare myself before every family gathering. I no longer have to analyze every word people say to me looking for the hidden insult. I no longer have to smile and put up with it while someone makes me feel like trash. And Matthew finally saw his sister and his mother for what they really are, which was something that needed to happen for our relationship to work long term. Last week I ran into Lauren, one of Vanessa's friends, at the supermarket. She saw me and turned her face away, walked in the opposite direction. And I just thought, good, perfect. Let them keep doing that. I don't need toxic people in my life, not even from afar. I have my husband who supports me. I have real friends who value me, and I have the peace of mind of knowing I finally stood up for myself after years of putting up with it. It wasn't pretty. It definitely wasn't elegant, but it was necessary. And if I could go back to the moment I took those car keys and left alone at night, I'd do it exactly the same way.